What's happening, everybody? On today's show, former Georgia quarterback JT Daniels has picked his next transfer destination. We'll tell you why he's heading to West Virginia, leaving the SEC. Also, we have a handful of spring games happening this weekend. Some things to watch for at Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, Arkansas, among others. And what's the latest on quarterback Arch Manning? We will discuss a bunch of SEC recruiting topics with our recruiting expert, John Garcia Jr. from Sports Illustrated. Locked on SEC starts right now.
Are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. Great to have you guys along. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at LockedOnSEC.com. Let's jump into it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And the odd college career of JT Daniels is going country roads. JT Daniels told ESPN and Pete Thamel that he is transferring to West Virginia, and then he called head coach Neil Brown to inform him of the decision on Wednesday morning. Daniels was the most notable player left in the transfer portal. He's a quarterback who went 7-0 as a starter the past two seasons at Georgia. He said, look, going up and down the roster, I feel like West Virginia has a very, very good situation and good pieces everywhere. It feels like a great fit for a quarterback. I feel like there's a really, really good team that I'm going to step into and do my part to contribute. Of course, Daniels transferred to Georgia after playing 2018 and 2019 at USC. He's a former ESPN 300 recruit. He's a five-star player from Modern Day High School in California. Chose West Virginia over the likes of Oregon State and Missouri after taking visits to all of them in recent weeks. Some people thought maybe there was a chance Eli Drinkwitz could land him at Mizzou. In fact, I said it'd be fun to see. Get to play Georgia, and we get to see him renew that rivalry there, going up against his former school. But nonetheless, a weird tale of JT Daniels. A lot of Georgia fans maybe thought he was going to be the savior at quarterback. Nobody saw Stetson Bennett doing what he ultimately did. But ultimately, even coming back from the injury last year, JT Daniels was not able to take the job back from Stetson Bennett because Bennett took the job by the reins and never looked back. So JT Daniels, best of luck heading off to West Virginia. But, man, you can't help but look back and wonder what could he have been the quarterback leading Georgia to that national championship last year if he stayed healthy? Probably, because there were a lot of really good pieces around him at Georgia this past season. Over at Florida, going to get a chance to see Billy Napier's crew for the first time tonight. Billy Napier says he wants a competitive spring game. If you remember, a few weeks ago, the Gators announced that they were moving their spring game to a Thursday night. So that is going to be tonight, the annual orange and blue game. First one under Billy Napier. Yesterday, the team's official Twitter account shared the roster for the two teams. Orange and blue squads being separated for this week's practices and their final spring session under Billy Napier, splitting the squad into two teams. Basically, he also moved the coaching staff, split them up on the two teams as well. The roster shows all staffers, including those in an off-field role, have been assigned a team for tonight's game. Kickoff is set for 6:30 Central, 7 Eastern. It'll stream on the SEC Network Plus. And one thing to watch for at Florida, how has quarterback Anthony Richardson developed as a passer, limiting turnovers? What's his comfort level in this new offense? We know at times last year when he got in, mistakes were a problem. He had some turnovers, particularly in that game in Baton Rouge at LSU, but we will see. I know the game against Georgia, he didn't perform all that well either. So we will see. He will have the keys to the Florida offense now. Have every chance to go out there and impress and wow the crowd. And Billy Napier called for the student section to show out and be loud and represent. So tonight we'll see just how far Anthony Richardson has come. Going to be fun to watch the Florida Gators and see what the 2022 version of them looks like. Meanwhile, over at Alabama, they are preparing for their A-Day spring game this weekend. And, of course, everybody knows Bryce Young is back, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. So we'll see if he can take his game to an even higher level this year. And it's going to be tough with some new wide receivers, but albeit a lot of talent all around him. But one other spot I'm going to keep an eye on, the running backs. As we know, Alabama had some injuries at the running back spot last year. They're going to have to replace Brian Robinson, Jace McClellan, Trey Sanders, Royday Williams. They will all get their shot after being injured last season. But the big one to keep an eye on, Jahmyr Gibbs coming over from Georgia Tech. He has dominated the spring session, and a lot of people think he is going to be the featured running back. Saban also signed two big-time incoming freshmen in Emmanuel Henderson and Jamarian Miller. They will add depth to that spot. But as we talked about earlier in this week, I'm really interested to see that Alabama offensive line as they work in a lot of new guys, some of the veteran O-linemen being banged up. Over at Arkansas, Sam Pittman and his crew, they are gearing up for their spring game on Saturday. It will be mainly a team-oriented structure, format-wise. Sam Pittman said it will be a live scrimmage, except portions of special teams. Teams will be 1 versus 2s and 2s versus 1. It will thud, particularly the veterans. Some of the 2s and 3s, mainly younger players, can tackle to the ground. But Pittman said, look, without us going live, I know the scrimmage will be somewhat subjective. We have a veteran team. We've thudded better than this year, than the 2 previous years we've been here. On offense, particularly, Pittman said Rocket Sanders has been one of the first guys to the study table and training table, and last year helped him gain confidence to now help the younger players. So he's a guy to keep an eye on this season. On Wednesday afternoon, Shane Beamer, he was on the Paul Feinbaum show previewing South Carolina's spring game happening this weekend. And Shane Beamer said his players are working hard to not take a step back in a conference where everyone else is always getting better. Beamer said it's such a thin line between winning and losing. Yes, we won 7 games last year, and that could have easily been 9, and that easily could have been 5 in some ways. Nobody in this conference is slowing down or going backwards by any stretch of the imagination. Big thing I'm looking forward to getting our eyes on, Spencer Rattler, the first look at him at South Carolina, the transfer quarterback coming over from Oklahoma. Of course, he was a Heisman hopeful going into last season at Oklahoma before things went sideways. But a new Gamecocks offense, a lot of new faces. Rattler, one of those that's going to catch a lot of the attentions. If he takes his game to the next level at South Carolina, well, the Gamecocks are going to be in for a really nice season. Over at LSU, their offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, talking with reporters this week about the new LSU offense under Brian Kelly. And Denbrock talked about the offensive line and having to work in some new guys, but also the quarterback spot. He said, we're getting a picture of who we're going to be this fall, but we have juggled the offensive line a lot, receivers a lot, but there does not appear to be much traction on finding a clear-cut starting quarterback for LSU. Jaden Daniels coming in from Arizona State. Miles Brennan coming back for his 6th year at LSU. Denbrock said he and Brian Kelly have been in this situation before, and they have used a 2-quarterback system in the past, so they are not ruling that out just yet. Meanwhile, one guy we became familiar with over at Auburn, notable transfer addition this offseason for the Ole Miss Rebels, J.J. Pegues, former Auburn tight end and lineman. He has opened up this week about his reasons for leaving Auburn. He's an Oxford, Mississippi native and said that he was homesick being at Auburn. He said, I know once the season was over with at Auburn, I just had second thoughts about my place there. I always wanted to come back to Oxford, but I just never knew when. Once Gus Malzahn left, I tried out the other staff. I really just didn't like the environment and some of the coaches there. So I decided once I hit the transfer portal, I could come back home. So that will be an interesting one to watch, what role J.J. Pegues plays when Ole Miss plays Auburn this year. Ultimately, he began his career at Auburn as a tight end before he shifted to the defensive line. He's practicing at nose tackle this spring, looking to improve as a pass rusher. On the recruiting front, Texas A&M, they've been red hot in recent weeks. They have now landed 3 pledges in 3 days. On Wednesday, the Aggies picked up a commitment from 4-star cornerback out of Dallas, Javon Thomas. the number 11 cornerback in the 2023 class. LSU football, they got some recruiting news on Wednesday night. Michael Doherty, he committed to LSU. He's from the state of Georgia, 6'1", 180-pound safety, rated the number 19 safety overall in the 2023 class. And in SEC hoops news, as we know, guys are moving around like crazy. How about some guys coming back over at Georgia? Cario Oquendo, Georgia's leading scorer last year, has decided to stay with the Bulldogs. According to John Rothstein of CBS Sports, Oquendo says he is going back to Georgia next year. And while Georgia did struggle last year, Oquendo, he was Georgia's top scorer with over 15 points per game. Over at LSU, they've had an exodus of players, but now they've got some players coming back. Yesterday, Justice Williams announced he's taking his name out of the transfer portal. He's staying at LSU. So him and Mawani Wilkinson have both withdrawn from the transfer portal. So some good news there. It seems like it's always guys leaving, at least for LSU and Georgia, some good news of guys staying. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to talk all things SEC recruiting with John Garcia Jr. of Sports Illustrated. Look, we told you guys a few weeks ago about our friends over at Athletic Greens. What is this stuff? Well, basically, with one delicious scoop of AG1, you were absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens that are going to help you start your day off right. It's a special blend of ingredients that supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all those things. Go check them out. It is lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, whatever it is something that is going to take care of you. Right now, it is time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It is just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million pills or supplements. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to athleticgreens.com/college. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/college. They will help you take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. athleticgreens.com/college. Roll along here, Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy here with you. And look, across the Southeastern Conference, recruiting never sleeps anymore. With NIL deals, the early signing day, the later signing day, recruiting's always been the bloodline of the SEC. And now more than ever, it is that much more important, especially for schools like A&M signing a historic number 1 recruiting class. We've got Arch Manning out there that everybody's interested on where he's going to go. So figured nobody better to bring in and talk all things recruiting than our buddy John Garcia Jr. He is the director of football recruiting for Sports Illustrated, and he's going to be joining us a good bit throughout the year to talk all things recruiting. John, what's going on, man? Welcome in.
Oh, I'm doing well, Chris. Like you said, always something to talk about. You didn't even mention the transfer portal, right? So, I mean, it's like every day there's a whole lot to dig into. So happy to do it with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start here, John, because the big news that just came out in the last day or so, we knew JT Daniels was done in Georgia. He was moving on. I know he visited Missouri. I thought that would have been a great get for Eli Drinkwitz to get him, but ultimately he makes the decision to go to West Virginia. Very interesting. A guy who's, former 5-star West Coast guy, starts at USC, goes to Georgia. Now he's up to West Virginia. I mean, he's getting a whole tour of the United States. But what did you make of the decision for JT Daniels to go to West Virginia?
I think like everyone else, Chris, I was a little bit surprised. I knew that there were limited options. Oregon State was involved early on. We heard about some other schools. But once he visited West Virginia, you never know. Neil Brown's had a good collection of quarterback talent, and he's shuffled through some pretty big names, but I don't know if he's had talent like a JT Daniels. So I think that's probably something that went into the sales pitch. They're transitioning off of their longtime quarterback and looking at some young guys in 2022. So it's the right time to bring in a JT Daniels, and I think it could present something a little bit different than what we've seen at West Virginia. We're used to a bit more dual threat, wide open spread offense. I think JT offers you the ability to go a little bit more conventional, a little bit more pro style, to focus on those athletes that West Virginia always seems to have on the outside. And they've always run the football relatively well as well. So I think that's something that complements a quarterback like a JT Daniels. But this is a big get. From a talent perspective, people probably need reminding that JT was one of the top quarterbacks in the country coming out. Banner freshman year at USC relative to his age after skipping a year of high school, no less. And then just ravaged by injuries at Georgia, gets locked in with a battle that he nearly won multiple times against Stetson Bennett. But again, the national title winner really can't be supplanted at this point. So understandably, he hits the portal, and now he's a Mountaineer, where I think we could probably start to assume he's going to be QB1 there. I don't think he makes a move if there's a heavy competition in that quarterback room. So I do think this is great timing for Neil Brown, who's got some pressure there at West Virginia, but no doubt the most talented quarterback he's had on his roster.
Yeah, I had somebody ask me that earlier today. They said, why would he go there? They've already got quarterbacks on the roster. I mean, why wouldn't you go down to like maybe a Division II where, you can step out? I'm like, because promises are made. They told him if he's going there, you're going to be the guy, right? So, no, it will be fun to follow his career and see what happened. Again, like Stetson Bennett, I always sound like I'm hating on the guy when I say this, but like he didn't set the world on fire when he was the quarterback. He did fine. He was a game manager and, of course, made the plays when it counted most of the national championship in the second half. But, like, for JT Daniels to come back and presumably he was healthy and couldn't beat Stetson out for the starting job again in Georgia, that to me just like, what happened there? Like, I'll be so interested to read the JT Daniels book down the road on, like, what was this whole journey about,
Yeah, really fascinating. A kid who, again, forced into some pretty big decisions early on in his career, skipping that senior year of high school, but then just a ton of injuries after that too, right? The ACL at USC, which apparently took longer to fully recover from. And then again, while back and forth battling with Bennett, dealing with some more smaller issues. So yeah, it is going to be fascinating, but sometimes you just need a fresh start. And I think with the maturity and the skill set that he has combined with the need there at West Virginia, I do think that could be a nice deal. And week 1, by the way, they play Pitt, which is a great rivalry regionally, but also another former teammate of his, Keaton Slovis, is now, probably QB1 there at Pitt. So, I mean, that's really fascinating as two former USC guys might be going at it.
Well, from one 5-star quarterback to another, John, Arch Manning. It is all anybody wants to talk about, particularly at Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss. Everybody thinks they have a chance. Texas is in there. I know Florida and LSU, they kind of jumped into the pool at one point, and now Virginia is in the mix. Where are we on the Arch Manning saga?
I think we're at where we were at the very beginning, which is a lot of teams are in it. There's no timetable for a decision, and that creates a desire elsewhere, right? If you're LSU or Florida, like you mentioned, that are viewed as outside looking in, you might feel like, hey, I've got 2 or 3 more months to court an Arch Manning, which is where we didn't think we would be come at the midpoint of the month of April, because Arch is absolutely taking his time with this decision. So now it opens the window for more visits and more hope for those coaching staffs, and probably most likely more hope for those fan bases that want every little piece of the Arch Manning sweepstakes. So yes, Virginia is in it. They hosted him. They hosted his teammate. His teammate had rave reviews of Charlottesville. His older sister goes to school at UVA. Chris Long was pitching him on being his driver while he goes to school there. I mean, everyone's all in on Arch Manning at every given point. But I do expect this to still be a 2 to 3 team battle. I think the defending national champs and the team they beat, Georgia and Alabama, are very much at the forefront of this race. Texas is in there as well. And Ole Miss is seemingly always going to be in the mix for Arch Manning. Although, if you watch what they've been doing, on the recruiting trail, they've looked at some other quarterbacks. Jaden Rashada, Marcel Reed recently visited Oxford. So I do think that Ole Miss gets the sense that it's more of an Alabama, Georgia, Texas situation at this point. Although, again, no timetable for a decision, so more visits are likely to go down.
Yeah, my gut feeling a few weeks ago, I thought Texas makes a lot of sense. You have Sarkisian, who's an offensive-minded head coach. And look, you talk about the Manning legacy, Ole Miss, Tennessee. Like, why not get away from all that, get out of the SEC, and go to Texas? Now, look, I know Texas is coming to the SEC down the road, but at least for a couple years, you can go create your own legacy, go do your own thing. But on the flip side, Quinn Ewers goes to Ohio State, then comes down to Texas. If he's going to be the starter for the Longhorns, like, he's going to be the starter the next couple of years. So is Arch willing to wait behind somebody? I think all that's interesting. And then somebody told me last week, they think if they had to place a bet, they think it's Alabama. So, man, it's crazy how this thing is really going. You could flip a coin right now.
You can, and I think the main defense of Alabama versus the other two schools makes sense, right? The stability is something the Mannings have talked about. They want stability at the top, and it gets no more stable than Nick Saban, and they want some continuity with the offensive staff thereafter. And for once, Alabama's going to have the same offensive coordinator for another year in Bill O'Brien. Now, will that be the same, 12 months from now? We're not sure, but at least how it's presented today to Arch Manning, there is stability and continuity with the offensive staff, which is not something that exists at Georgia, where his main link to the Mannings was Matt Luke, who is now, of course, retired, or at Texas, where Steve Sarkisian is still trying to get that program on track in year 2. So that is really the main defense for why Alabama could be the safest pick today. So totally understandable, but honestly, you could craft a similar argument for other programs with some other things that are high on the Manning wish list, like offensive production and the opportunity to play relatively early.
Back with John Garcia in just a second, but BetOnline, they are your number one source for all things betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, which we are about to get into the thick of, and the start of Major League Baseball season, about a week in now. And BetOnline, they are your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. I always tell you guys, I love the articles they start getting, looking ahead to football stuff, whether it's Heisman odds or odds to win the college football championship next year in Los Angeles. They've got tons of different information and great articles up there. Head on over to their website today. You can do so on your mobile device and bookmark them. Make them your go-to every day and check out some of the trends and action before you do anything. Get all the information you need at betonline.net. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Continue our conversation with John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting for Sports Illustrated. So cool, John, to have you part of partnering with the Locked On Podcast Network and offering some recruiting insight across all our different podcasts. Of course, here we're talking all things SEC. And granted, I mean, we could go 4 hours with you, so we won't keep you that long. But I do have a couple more questions for you, and we appreciate your time. Jimbo Fisher just made this huge splash, signing a historic number one recruiting class. And it felt like, to me, I didn't look. I know the NIL deal probably plays a part of this. They'll never admit to it. We'll find out years from now. Somebody will write a book. But doesn't it also feel like once 3 5-stars are in, another guy's going, well, let me jump in. And it feels like it almost started like a chain reaction where all these guys said, hey, let's all go be special together and we can help A&M over that hump. Because what I hear from everybody else around the SEC is, yeah, A&M, they just go 8-4. They underachieve every year. They've never won the SEC since they've been in it, a decade in. But, man, this class, the 2022 class, and now they're already starting to build for 2023, feels like this is put up or shut up time now for Jimbo. But, man, this is the way you do it, right?
It is, 3 commits in the last, few days, as you mentioned, with this class of 23. But that 22 class is historic. And you're absolutely right, Chris. It's one thing to lock down the state of Texas, right? We just mentioned that Texas, had a bad year. Let's just call it what it is. Texas had a bad year, year one under Sarkisian. Oklahoma has transition. It's kind of the perfect setup to dominate the state of Texas. That is not a huge surprise relative to Jimbo Fisher's recruiting credentials. But to go and get the top 2 recruits in Florida, to go get the number 1 kid in Tennessee, the number 1 defensive recruit in Pennsylvania, to go into Georgia and get the kid who reclassifies out of nowhere and get him on board as well. That's when you start to say, okay, this thing is different because it's outside of that Texas footprint. They were great in state, but they were equally as great out of state. And that's why it became such a historic thing. And they just lined up these visits right, getting these elite kids to visit campus together. And I think it was not only the win over Alabama on the field in October, but right after that, Walter Nolan starts to think about making a verbal commitment. One of the polarizing high-level recruits from last year that kids gravitated towards. He was a big name, and that matters in college football recruiting, NIL notwithstanding. So I think it was kind of the perfect storm for Texas A&M. So everyone's curious to see how they follow it up in 23, but the start has been pretty darn good, especially over the last few days.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I mean, picking up a couple guys already in this class and committed for next year. I mean, is it even addressing needs? Like, or is A&M just saying, look, if you're a 4-star, 5-star D lineman, DB, whatever you are, we don't care. We just want the best of the best.
Yeah, I think that's, the model that most people are following. It's more of the Nick Saban model, where you're like building a mini team with every single recruiting class. You're going to have a quarterback. You're going to have, 7 or 8 trench prospects between the O-line and the D-line, and then you want to build out position groups together relative to your needs. But, yeah, you're building like a little mini team. So especially early in the cycle like we are, you're not going to say no to a blue-chip recruit, especially from the state of Texas. And I think the last 3 kids were all Texas, and that's, again, something we expect Texas A&M to have a very strong footing with relative to the transition at Oklahoma and relative to the question marks still surrounding the Longhorns.
This next kid, and look, forgive me, I've never been to Southern California. I've never been to Hawaii, so the pronunciations I get a little thrown off on sometimes, but Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback that is committed to Tennessee that has Vol fans so excited about. What do we know about him, and what is he going to bring to an offense that, look, man, it looks like Hendon Hooker is going to go out really well with Josh Heupel, and then in comes Nico, who could pick up right where Hendon Hooker leads off.
Yeah, this is an intriguing situation to watch there in the SEC East, and theoretically, outside of the top spot at Georgia, I mean, who's the second best program overall in the East right now? You could make a case for 3 or 4 teams, and Tennessee is right in that mix, and they should have another good year, particularly offensively. So all those things I think factored in to Nico picking the Vols, but really, like you mentioned, the fans. I mean, the fans were such a big part of his verbal commitment. The first thing he told me about Tennessee before he even committed was the fans. He said, I signed my first autographs there. They were chanting my name, like just stuff that you don't get anywhere but the SEC. No disrespect to the Pac-12 and where he's from in California. You're not going to get that at a USC game or a UCLA basketball game where they're chanting for the football recruit who happens to be in town. So there is a galvanizing buildup for Tennessee right now, and Nico's at the forefront of it. And he's so marketable, 6'6", 210 pounds, rocket arm. I mean, just watch any of his throws, and that ball absolutely zooms. He's a high-level high-level volleyball player. His dad runs a 7-on-7 team that has all these West Coast kids that are thinking about Tennessee right now. And when you get a quarterback committed very early on that's so nationally known, it creates a desire to jump on board, especially with skill position and offensive line recruits. And that's something that we expect Tennessee to start to ascend with over the next few weeks and months, with Nico on board so publicly and visibly rocking that notable Tennessee orange.
I just got a couple more for you, just quick hitters, John. The 2 newcomers to the SEC, Brian Kelly at LSU, and of course Billy Napier at Florida. What impact are they making already? I mean, I know they're still getting settled in. They probably don't even have plaques up on the wall of their office yet, but how quickly are they having to adapt and start recruiting for the 2023 class?
Well, I go back to the end of the 22 cycle, Chris. Both of them splashed in the right way. I mean, Brian Kelly getting Harold Perkins from the state of Texas to be one of the few to look past Texas A&M to jump on board was one of the bigger recruiting wins individually that anyone had in the country. And then Billy Napier, when he got to Florida, he signed 3 SI-99 recruits pretty much immediately, including one formerly committed to Notre Dame. So I think they made splashes, statements as soon as they got into town. And now, of course, they're going to have time to build out their class of 2023. I know Florida spring game is tomorrow. They've got a crazy list of recruits that are going to visit, and LSU's done a really good job of getting elite talent on campus consistently. And I don't know when this is going to air, but by Wednesday evening, they're going to add to the commitment list. I don't want to give too much away, but things are picking up for LSU on the recruiting trail as well. And this is to be expected with coaches who have been there, done that at different programs, now doing so with a different platform in a conference with a talent pool that the SEC provides.
Last one for you, John, my Ole Miss buddy. He is so excited. Bryson Sanders, I know he recently visited, a big 4-star offensive lineman. What's Lane Kiffin got brewing right now?
Well, they're going to have an interesting methodology to their recruiting going forward, right? You know, Lane is crowning himself a transfer portal king. So he's going to continue to utilize that at a maybe 50-50 clip with high school recruits, but there's still a huge need for particular positions at Ole Miss, quarterback, O-line, chief among them. And Bryson Sanders not only got an official visit in over the weekend, I believe it was the first official visit that Ole Miss has hosted in this class of 23. So he was feeling the love. He certainly felt the red carpet treatment that was bestowed upon him there at Oxford. And he talked about the youth and energy of the coaching staff there. It's not just Lane Kiffin. I mean, you've got a 29-year-old OC and Charlie Weiss Jr. You've got a 29-year-old offensive line coach in Jake Thornton. So for Bryson, it's like everyone's under 30 who I'm going to be dealing with. And that's something that really resonates with me as a 17, 18-year-old recruit. But as he talked to the players, they said that it comes with wisdom because those guys have been around coaching, much like Lane Kiffin, pretty much from the jump. So it brings a different level of wisdom, and you can counter that with the ability to resonate with a young prospect. So Bryson definitely feeling the love from Ole Miss. His top four is the Rebels, Tennessee, LSU, to bring it back to Brian Kelly, and Oklahoma, and he wants to commit in June. So as of right now, Ole Miss has got a great shot.
John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting for Sports Illustrated. Of course, SI.com is the place to find all your stuff. And, of course, follow John on Twitter at @JohnGarcia_JR. John, appreciate the time, man. We're going to do this again with you. And, again, so much to discuss when it comes to recruiting around the SEC. We can't hit on everybody, but we'll try to hit on the schools we missed when we have you again. Appreciate the time, man.
Sounds good, Chris. Thanks for having me.
All right, that again is John Garcia from Sports Illustrated. Appreciate him taking some time with us. That is just about going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys for listening. And again, we'll be talking all things SEC tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC. You guys have a great day, everybody.